everyone. You know what? We're going to play a game today of geoprocessor politics. It's part of the New World Order and balkanization. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It's Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong Gang. We've got a lot going on in the world, as there seems to be going on in the world every day. Got a smaller gang today. We had a couple people between weather and medical stuff not able to make it. So let me introduce you to, we go to war with the army we have, not the army we want. Let me introduce you to today's army gang here. First of all, you got a chuckle out of that. Joining us from down in Austin, where it's a frigid day in Austin. He is a Futurum analyst, CTO, co-founder of Visible Impact, Guy Courier. Hey, Guy, welcome.
Thank you, and a proud member of the Alan Schimmel Army, even if I'm not the army he wants today.
Well,
I'm only
look,
the army he has.
Me and Rummy.
It's good to be here again on this frigid Austin day. It's 19 degrees right now, which is darn cold for Central Texas.
That's downright frigid for Central Texas. Oh, man. Joining us also, speaking of frigid, up in Harrison, New York. I don't know what the weather is there, though. It's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm good. This is a volunteer army as far as I know, but do we need to institute a draft?
We
I
might.
thought I was part of the draft.
Well, I was thinking about bringing in North Korean troops.
All right. Some remote IT gang members?
What the heck? It wouldn't be the first time they jumped into someone else's war. Anyway, on that note, Mike, we've got a couple things to go over today. One is this part of a bigger issue that I'm going to be addressing on my Shimmy Says this week tomorrow. And that is, I call it the balkanization of the tech world. And it has a lot to do, I think we're entering into a new world order, right? We're seeing the death knell of the post-World War II New World Order that was kind of modified with the fall of the Soviet Union. But we're going into a balkanization era, and it's affecting tech in general, processors, CPUs of all things in particular. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, things are, shall we say, a little on the unsettled side. I'm not quite clear what's happening here. In the 1 minute, the president is saying that the Taiwanese stole our chip business and we want it back. The next minute, we're talking with TMSC about they're going to take over parts of Intel and the foundries, but they're going to build those in the U.S. in return. And who knows, maybe this is part of some larger exit strategy from Taiwan that we're going to give back to mainland China someday. But Guy, what's going on here?
Well, to start with, I personally I try to avoid the words strategy or plan when it applies to the current U.S. administration, because I think it's a lot more shoot from the hip approach. That sort of an approach. Just get going and do something and say something depending on what the will or wish of the moment is and what sounds like it's going to be interesting and popular and supported. I think that the broad perspective on this is pretty clear, which is exactly like you said. Intellectually speaking, globally, in Europe and the United States, there has been this whole globalization push since the Bretton Woods conference right after World War II. And it was supposed to be this global supply chain and this wonderment and amazingness of all kinds of countries around the world specializing in what they could specialize in, and trade and all that other sort of stuff, getting it all over the place. I think there was already, thanks to the Great Recession, a little bit of concern, let's say popular, non-intellectual concern about this. So again, people have been saying, built in the USA is better and all that other sort of stuff since the 70s, since the 60s, when a lot of our manufacturing started to move offshore. But none of that had the real effect of slowing or halting globalization. What did was COVID and the global shutdown of the supply chain and the sudden realization that there are certain strategic products that one does not want to have across an ocean. One would like to have onshored in your own nation, in our case in the United States, but for other nations in their nations. And one of those big strategic resources, even pre-AI, was computer chips of many kinds. And so that led to the CHIPS Act during the previous administration. The CHIPS Act has been this huge investment in onshoring to the United States manufacturing, even if by a company like TSMC, the biggest chip manufacturer in the world, and let's not forget that their equipment, the key equipment they use comes from basically one country as well, the Netherlands, right? It's this onshoring of the ability to create these chips. The arrival of AI made that even more acute, made that need even more acute. So that's kind of what's been going on this whole time. And it's been joined by this popular movement when people couldn't get basic goods like toilet paper and stuff during the pandemic, that we needed to have more stuff, more jobs, more manufacturing, more capabilities within the United States in the case of some other kind of supply shock like what occurred at COVID. Now, when I go and say, like, I don't really pay attention to plans and strategies and all that other sort of stuff, the basic strategy such as it exists is this tariffs strategy, this idea that you're going to force other countries to do what you want by making it more expensive for them to import stuff into the United States. The statement by the president of Taiwan, I'm a little confused, and maybe you can help clarify for me or for us how this states somehow that Taiwan is going to invest more in the United States. And I scratch my head as much as you do. And see, now I say that all the time, thanks to you, Mike. I scratch my head as much as you do with this idea that we're going to onshore everything, but we're going to have TSMC, which is a foreign company, own and run it, which was what was being discussed, like with respect to Intel's Intel Foundry business. Again, that's onshored manufacturing, but it would be run from Taiwan. That's all very confusing. But in the end, what we're talking about is threats through tariffs to force something that's already happening and has been happening for the past 4 years, which is this move of manufacturing, chip manufacturing in particular, into the countries that use them so that they don't have to worry as much about the global supply chain. And that is a retrenchment, like Alan and Mike, you said, that's a retrenchment away from the world order of the previous 50, 60 years of increased globalization.
75.
Well, I think after
75.
Canada becomes the 51st state, TMSC will just move there, right? Is that how that works?
I'm not going to take
Maybe
the bait.
Taiwan will become the 52nd state. It's worth noting, incidentally, that just recently, like within the last week or something, the State Department removed in its Taiwan information page or whatever it is, it removed a flat-out statement from the U.S. government that it does not support Taiwanese independence from China. They removed that, and China reacted as well. So there's this other piece of it of like sort of this nationalist Taiwan support side or whatever you want to call it that has not existed since Taiwan was created. So I don't know what's going on here. Alan, step in and explain.
Guy, I have to tell you, first of all, though, kudos for you for the historical context and laying this all out. You built a beautiful case there. That was really well. Really done well. Professorial even, I might say. In terms of the strategy, I think, we all kind of know what the strategy of the administration is. I call it TSOTW. Throw shit on the wall.
Throw shit on it, yeah.
And see what sticks. I mean,
I used to call it MSU. Like I'd say I went to MSU. People say, "Oh, Michigan State." No, make shit up.
Yeah, well, that's basically what they do. But again,
this tariffs thing, though, Alan, this tariffs thing really is a strategy. It is a simple one-step strategy.
But here's the problem:
threaten tariffs, put on tariffs. But it is,
yes, it is a strategy. This strategy would have worked real well in 1958, which is just about where Donald Biff Trump is stuck in. Okay? When the US is the predominant market by 10x over the rest of the world, and you put the barriers into doing business in the US, the rest of the world has to march in lockstep. Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. And when you do tariffs, you're forcing other countries to do tariffs. I've said this before, it's not an America first strategy, it's an America alone strategy. Because you're going to put up tariffs, and then so is Canada, so is Mexico, so is China, so is Europe, so is Brazil, so is South Africa, so is every other country in the world. And so what do you have? You have the balkanization here. And Donald Trump says, well, we still have the biggest market. Everyone wants to do business with us. Yes and no. We have 330 million people. China has 1.4 billion. 1.4 billion. Let me say it again, 1.4 billion. India has more children in honors programs in school, in math and science honors programs, than we have children. Period. So what's going to happen here in short order is when the rest of the world says F you, and they put up their own barriers and say, we don't want American goods. There's only so much we're going to make in America that we can consume in America. At the end of the day, a good part of our economy is still based on exporting food, materials. Are we going to have corn rotting in the fields because we don't know what to do? Oh, maybe we'll make ethanol out of it. I don't know. Are we going to have crops rotting in the fields because no one will buy our food? No one will take our meat. No one, and how the farmer's going to feel about that? We could buy American, but there's only so much Americans could buy. There's a lot more of them than there are of us. And that's the basic fallacy in this strategy, if you want to call it a strategy. That's, not to mention what it's going to do for inflation and everything else.
Yeah. Coming back to the chips thing, though, the part that I don't get, Guy, is like we seem to be talking like we can put up a semiconductor manufacturing facility in 6 months. And last time I checked, it'll be like closer to the end of the decade before any of these things come online.
Okay, I try to stay pretty open-minded in terms of I'm not a big supporter of this administration's moves or actions. I'm not a supporter at all in general, but I do understand that there's a lot of people who support it and like what they're seeing. And so I want to be respectful towards that point of view, even if I disagree with it. So what you're referring to, Mike, however, is a classic political move, which is to take credit for something that has already been done by somebody else. The CHIPS Act is already creating, it's a roughly 18-month accelerated timeline to go from field to factory to fab, right? So yeah, it's not going to be 6 months, but most of these, if not all of these new fab facilities are not going to, or none of them are online yet due to the CHIPS Act, as far as I know. At least if there are any, it's few, and so they are going to come online this year. And the current administration is going to take credit for it, even though it essentially had nothing to do with it.
Guy, I don't know. You're assuming they're going to leave the money in the CHIPS Act. The problem is the CHIPS Act is part of, they refer it the Green New Deal, and they want to cut the Green New Deal.
Okay, so hold on, Alan. The CHIPS Act doesn't exist anymore in Newspeak.
Right.
Okay, the CHIPS Act has been, you don't hear anything about the CHIPS Act anymore.
I think they called it Truth Speak, if we're going to go Orwellian here.
You don't hear about the Infrastructure Act, or what was it called, the Inflation Reduction Act, whatever, right? They don't exist anymore. What happened in the past 4 years doesn't exist unless there's a beneficial outcome, in which case it is thanks to the current administration. It's like I said, it's an old political move, however craftily executed this time. So, but Mike, that's where it comes from. They can say all kinds of stuff. People say all kinds of stuff, and when they get away with it, because they get away with at least some of it,
Well, if you
then
say it enough and
we want
loud
to speak
enough.
truth, and
Yeah, if you say it enough times and loud enough. But here's the thing. I don't think it's just a question of building a foundry. I think it's having the right people, the right training, the right materials, the right everything else. And again, if other countries aren't going to buy what you're outputting because you've tariffed them.
that's not so. So I get where you're coming from, Alan, but I think the primary initial impact of the tariffs, should they stick, is to the American
Oh,
consumer
no
and
doubt about it.
business
It's an
as prices
inflation
go up.
tax
And
on
so,
Americans.
so the reciprocal tariffs are going to affect the
Key
citizens of those countries,
constituents.
the consumers in those
No,
countries.
it's
But
going
the
to
biggest
affect
impact on the world economy comes from the United States, business and consumer not buying as much because it's more expensive.
All right. So let me come back to this other point then.
not anymore.
We have talked about Intel as this national treasure in the past. So is Intel not so much a national treasure at this point, and we're gonna be happily slicing it up with some sort of strange arrangement with TMSC? I mean, what's going on here? Suddenly, the tenor and the tone has changed.
I think it started to change 12 months ago. And then was it 5 or 4 months ago when Pat Gelsinger quit? That was this sort of one of those moments in the news that suddenly causes everybody to take notice. Intel's main position has been in data center CPUs, less so on desktop and client devices, but still there as well. I only say less so because AMD has had long inroads into there, and it's a lower margin business. When Intel got creaky in its sort of combo fab and microarchitecture strategy, when it started to get creaky in that and sort of slow moving, it wasn't so much noticed because it was still a good default choice, especially for cloud instances. And it was just understood, right? What AMD's end run did in the end, combined with the sudden attention on the GPU, it just sucked all the wind out of Intel's sails. And I think you're right. I think that the mighty have fallen at this point, and it's a pretty open CPU market, especially with ARM jumping in. And instead of just being a design firm, suddenly Masayoshi Son is saying, wait a minute, like, we got to get in on this manufacturing game too, because there's just so much money out there.
Well, I
So,
think part of that is I wouldn't trust what anybody is telling me about the foundry, so I want to take control of my own destiny.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's more to that too, though, right? Look, let's say the emperor has no clothes. Intel missed the boat on mobile chips and GPUs, and everyone knew this for a long time already. Certainly on mobile, right? You wouldn't have Qualcomm as powerful as it is had Intel had a mobile chip alternative. And as a matter of fact, when you go buy laptops now, it's not uncommon to see Snapdragon laptops, right? So Intel kind of missed the boat on that. I mean, and quite frankly, when you talk about their server processors, right? You had Xenons, but they just they kept doing incremental of what they were already doing, incremental improvements on it, and they missed markets. It happens. It's a rare bird like Microsoft that could miss the internet initially and still regain position. That can maybe, it didn't miss AI certainly, but Microsoft has been late to some of the big tech innovations in its space and still been able to recover. Kudos to them. Intel miss these, and frankly, their ability to recover is in doubt. Now, TSMC, though, has a history of making promises about moving stuff to America and doing stuff in the US and then not quite following through on it. There's already some TSMC foundries in various stages of construction in the US that have never.
Thanks to the CHIPS Act.
Yes,
Continue.
and absolutely. With
Yeah,
CHIPS
thanks
Act
to the CHIPS
money.
Act, because they were basically bribed. They were sent a bucket load of money by the United
But
States
I don't
citizenry.
believe those are functional or anywhere near functional yet.
No, they're not. No, they like Mike said, they take 2 years to go online. And when you have acts of Congress like the CHIPS Act or any act of Congress, it takes 12 months to just even like get their ducks in order to ensure that the money is being spent correctly in the right places, all that other sort of thing.
But
So
that's the way government functions. That doesn't mean you
it
come
is,
in and
yes.
gut it. But all of that being said, especially as it relates to Taiwan, if you're TSMC, what do you do here? You are, in essence, buddied up with the Taiwanese government, right? You want to maintain that status quo. You recognize that long-term, present administration may or may not do anything to prevent Taiwan becoming part of China. There's patriotism and there's money, and they don't necessarily come into the same fist or hand here. And so that's going to be some decisions that are made. But again, this is chips in particular. I think we're going to see this throughout tech, right? The concept of data sovereignty is something we all recognize, right? I want to keep my data within the borders of my country. What we're going to enter into is tech sovereignty. I want my tech here. And it's not just in the US, because don't underestimate the EU in mass is not that much smaller than the US market. The Chinese market is not that much smaller than the US market. The Indian market is probably the fastest growing in the world because just of sheer numbers. So short term, it may sound like a good thing. A year, 2 years out, this whole tech sovereignty thing, and who loses for it? We all lose for it. Because as consumers, we're better off in a worldwide competition where we get to choose the best and the most efficient and the right tools for the job, not what only I could get. Like, you don't want to be like a Soviet citizen. What was the name of the Russian cars, Mike? You remember?
No idea, but we're going to be coming back to talk about tariffs later this week. So
All right. We'll take a break here on Techstrong Gang. I hear the music playing. We're going to take a break. We're coming back and we're going to talk about an Apple encryption angst here on Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, folks, we're back with maybe a topic that's slightly less contentious, but probably not much less contentious. The United Kingdom, the land of the Official Secrets Act, is once again pushing Apple for access to encrypted data in the name of security. Oddly enough, in this country at different times, the FBI has kind of echoed a similar sentiment, but now we have people in Congress basically wagging their finger at the UK saying, how dare you want access to this information? And this story is kind of a continuing adventure because law enforcement says we need access to encrypted data to catch the bad guys. And then other folks are saying we have a fundamental right to privacy. And Alan, you've been watching this. Can this ever get resolved, or is there some middle ground here, or is this like we just got to one side's got to suck it up,
Yeah.
or whether they like it or not?
Well, look, they can always go buy that program from the Israeli company that breaks the Apple encryption. But that being said, I thought we did find a sort of middle ground on this back around, after 9/11, when under the George W. Bush administration, things were a little saner back then. And they set up like a whole separate court system for when government can go in and demand these kinds of things. Now, breaking Apple encryption was a different story, but there was a court set up, right? And then that was obviously abused during subsequent administrations, and that kind of went away. But here's the bottom line.
Well, the court's still there, Alan.
The court is there, yes. I just don't know
Yeah.
how much it's used. But in any event, what complicates this is it's crossing borders again, right? Data sovereignty, tech sovereignty. Those U.S. congressmen who were pissed at the U.K. would only too gladly approve U.S. agencies being able to do it, right? Now,
I don't know. Ron Wyden's one of them, and
well,
he's
Rob,
been
they're the minority now, guy.
fair enough. Yeah.
He could yell and scream from the back benches, as they would say over in London, right? But the fact is, this is really an issue of, do we have a fundamental right to privacy? And yes, there are times when every one of us would say, the heck with it, we need to get that information. I need to know if there's more attacks planned in a 9/11 kind of scenario. That's a life or death for thousands, catastrophe prevented. But should it be up to an Apple, a Google, a Microsoft to be the defenders of that right to privacy? Right? Because it's an individual's right. To put it in legal terms, does Apple have standing to talk on our behalf or to represent on our behalf and say, no, you can't have the ability to unencrypt this, even though we have that ability, we can't give that to you. Right? And that I think is a fundamental issue here. There's two issues. Number one, do individuals have that right? And when is the rights of the government, a government, supersede that individual right? So a classic balancing, right, of responsibility here. And then number two, what standing does Apple, Google, or any of these companies have in standing in the way? So to me, that's the pivotal issues here.
It's not much different than a wiretap when the phone company would put the wiretap in it. Well, as long as there was a court order, they weren't going to stand up and say, no, that phone is your private reserve, even though theoretically your home is your castle. But Guy, I mean, is this kind of just, legal grandstanding?
I am really curious what the origin of this strategy on the part of the Labour government in the UK is. But let's start by being clear about the difference between what you described, Mike, and what you are reacting to, Alan, because you said the key two words, court order. Court order is a process. There is a warrant for wiretapping. There's a warrant for going into my personal safe to see what's in there, or for strip searching me, or any of those violations of privacy. There is a process for that. A due process, meaning one that involves, for example, a grand jury, 25 of my peers evaluating the reasons and that sort of thing. I know a lot of court orders happen on a more administrative basis from like a judge overnight or whatever. There's all of these are part of a process that weigh the safety of the public and the enforcement of laws against privacy. That's not what we're talking about here in the UK, because the access that they're demanding is on-demand access at any time with no particular surveillance, in other words. The ability to go in and take a look any old time they want. Maybe that's unfair to say any old time they want. Maybe they have a process as well, but there is a difference there. There have been cases, and I'm not as expert in this particular field as many, but there have been cases where, at least in the United States, the government has, or through process, there has been a warrant or a request for information from encrypted information held in the cloud, and I think the companies have resisted or refused. Apple's contention is that it has created a system where Apple itself cannot provide that access. But nonetheless, warrants can be issued and the demand can be made, and the target of the warrant can be, compelled to comply by decrypting or putting in their password or whatever it is that they do, or they go to jail just for not complying. That's not what's happening here in the UK. I think that, Alan, this question of whether or not people have the right to privacy is a question that needs to be brought more public and discussed more publicly, because I think most people in the United States, at least, just assume they do have the right to privacy, but there is a long arm of legal argumentation that there is no such right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution, that some U.S. states do have the right to privacy in their constitutions, but that the United States Constitution does not have it. This is a really...
But Guy, there is an amendment, Bill of Rights, undue search and seizure and due process clauses that you do have rights. I mean, they might not call it a right to privacy.
Yeah, but they don't have to do with privacy. So then, in other words,
it's your right to property.
The circumspection
it
around...
comes out of a right to property, right? That's your property.
I'm not sure there's a right to property in the Constitution. Undue search and seizure, I get. What had created the FISA courts, what created this situation where there was a process, however secret, before doing surveillance, which is not something pursuant to a criminal investigation, it's just surveillance, had to do with the principle that if a U.S. citizen could be surveilled, could be spied on, there should be a process to ensure that that's not just done, willy-nilly.
Mm-hmm.
But there is maybe no
probable cause is the term,
constitutional foundation for that. And I don't know how the UK law works. I think you've hit on exactly the main issue here, which is outside of the process of courts and adjudication and all that other sort of stuff, where there's a suspicion of a crime or a lawsuit or any other, outside of all of that, just as a general rule, should the government any government anywhere be allowed to simply spy on anybody?
Yep. So, but Guy, you're talking about a very U.S. specific probable cause, undue search and seizure. These are U.S. due process itself, very U.S. centered view. Now, happens to be the U.K. may in fact have a more evolved system of that than we do. And
no constitution, however.
No constitution, but they have their common law.
Not a written constitution, yeah.
They have their common law. They have a long-standing, going back to the Magna Carta of rights of individuals versus the monarchy, the government. But what happened, and so let's assume the UK has US-style safeguards in place, right, to show probable cause before they would do such a thing. What happens to the next country when Libya wants to do it, or Syria, or North Korea, or whatever? There's 200 and something countries out there, right? And that, you're going to start picking which countries really do have probable cause, which ones don't, and that's the ones I should do it to. If you're an Apple, you can't be in that position. You don't want to be the arbiter of which country is really doing it right or wrong. Right. So I think Apple's tried to take a smarty pants kind of, excuse the term, but a smarty pants kind of thing, saying, You know what? We don't have the ability to do it. It's encrypted and it's out of our hands. And now the UK is coming in and saying, nonsense. I want you to build that back in there. I want that.
Yeah. So
So
here's the second step,
subtlety
right? Which
there.
is that ADP, the encryption and protection, data protection technology from Apple is not enabled by default. You have to go in and positively say, like, I want this on my system. But essentially, it's kind of like Apple has invented or designed or created something, and the UK is saying, "Oh no, you can't even have that. You can't offer that
Right.
here," because
That's
that
really that's the issue here.
but I don't get it. Like, I still don't get it.
Apple doesn't want to
The
be
UK,
in
if they
that.
have any process at all for any specific case, they can run through whatever process they have to compel, discovery or whatever the word is of whatever has been protected, and Apple doesn't have to have anything to do with it.
The end user does, but the end user won't give it to them. If you remember back to
And they go to jail.
remember when
Yeah,
PKI,
but if I have like a terrorist situation, I can't just call up the
well,
end user.
that's
and
what
say,
happened in 9/11. Sharif Khalid or whatever his name is, isn't giving it up, no matter how much we water tortured him. But go back let's drop the politics for a second. Go back to when PKI first came on the scene. You guys are all of an age, you remember. That was one of the cool things about PKI is once I set up that public-private key, no one could get to that without me saying, okay. Apple, Google, none of those people stood in the way. It was my encrypted data. And that was one of the big draws for PKI. One of the big
Yeah, and that's you're hit. That's what it is. Because Mike, in a terrorist situation, if the terrorists are dumb, they're going to get caught. If they're not dumb, they're going to use PKI or whatever the modern equivalent is, and Apple, Google, whoever, who cares? The information will still be encrypted end to end.
And I think to a certain degree, Apple and Google wish we'd go back to that. And they get
my first reaction to the UK doing this was, this is dumb. But it was just a gut reaction. Now I'm coming back to that. It's kind of dumb. What are they trying to do?
They want Apple to build the
now that
back
Silk
door.
Road is back, they're just everybody can just use find some hacked encryption method on Silk Road if they want to.
Until quantum breaks that. But who knows?
Oh man, I was going to mention quantum. Well done, sir.
All right. Hey, we're going to take a break. Let's come back and talk about HoloLens and Microsoft, pushing that off the table. We're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey folks, we're back and we're going to shift the gear a little bit, but we are now going on with the continuing saga. What happened with Microsoft HoloLens? The latest is that they have taken the HoloLens that they were selling to the government and the military and shifted it over to an outfit called Anduril. I guess they will service that particular market. There are other niche markets that are using these headsets for various training use cases, but Guy, it seems like the notion that really these virtual reality headset things are going to become a consumer product, is that dead at this point? What's going on?
Well, so this is really interesting, right? When we talked on this show about the Microsoft sunsetting, what is it, HoloLens 2, my reaction was Microsoft's got so much. I mean, their core strength is really in the business market and the enterprise market and public sector too, actually. And there's so many commercial and industrial applications to augmented reality or virtual reality. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And I speculated at the time that that HoloLens was being run out of the consumer side of Microsoft, and it was another one of these Mars and Venus situations where they just didn't know how to market it into the business and public sector side. And so now we come all the way around here, and we find out there's some. Again, I'm going to speculate. There's some enterprising sales team over at Microsoft that in 2018, so quite a while ago, went and sold augmented reality to military, which is just about the most obvious application if you've ever played a video game ever of augmented reality, would be military uses. And so this same sales team or the delivery team on it was like, wait, you can't shut this thing down because, we got a military contract here. We got the 9-figure deal, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what do? Well, Microsoft still wants to get rid of it. So they're giving it, well, not giving it, they're selling it to Anduril, which, by the way, how many of these, the Lord of the Rings named secret military, whatever, we have Palantir, we have Anduril, there must be a bunch more out there. In any case, it both validates my contention that these things are really best in industrial or public sector or commercial use. That Apple's own approach, which is very consumery, is bound to fail or be so niche it's whatever. And then I think we have a new one from Google, if I remember right. There's a fair amount of new activity going on here, but that in the end, kind of like driverless cars and driverless vehicles, it's really commercial that's ultimately going to build that market. This is one particular contract in one particular instance, but Microsoft has a long history of supporting and enabling and selling software into the U.S. military, knows how to do it. I imagine there's a lot of personnel who are going to move over from Microsoft over to Anduril to help them out with this. And in the end, was there a licensing agreement here as well? I mean, they're not just simply selling the technology wholesale.
Well, the part that has me scratching my head a little bit, if I understand this correctly, is 120,000 mixed reality goggles for $21.9 billion.
Well, it's the startup cost of the program. Theoretically, when you buy more, it probably get cheaper per headset.
Yeah, and come on, Mike.
Well,
like this is an old trope of the $1,000, $2,000 toilet.
Let me dive in here, guys.
You do it. You do it first. And I'll
this Anduril Industries, this isn't some kind of dummy corporation set up in Budapest, Hungary, is it?
Correct.
They're not
No.
put
I think Anduril
bombs
is a
in and
long-standing
blow up all
military
of our
contract.
soldiers one day.
No,
Is it like a
they're-
Mossad operation? What are we talking here?
No, they're a well-known defense contractor.
Okay, that was number one. Number two, 21. What's a mere $21.9 billion to the U.S. Department of Defense? This is one of the things that I really think we
Over 6 years, incidentally, just because this started in 2018. But continue.
The real issue is, a lot of us are wringing our hands about, or joyfully clapping our hands in glee about what this DOGE, whatever, Elon Musk and his merry band of renegades are doing. But they're doing it on the civilian side of government for the most part. And here's the reality of the U.S. government expenditures and budget. When you take Medicare and Social Security and the Department of Defense budget and all its related agencies and all that good stuff, right? I think something like 80 to 90% of the U.S. budget are on those three things: Medicare, Social Security, DOD. Everything else is peanuts. So you're sitting and trying to crack peanuts here, but you're not going to really affect the trajectory of this thing unless you really hit where the real money is. And no one's going to stand, I don't think anyone, well, I should never say that, but unless you're willing to take some knives to some sacred cows, like a $22 billion virtual reality goggle set. You're never gonna, everything else is just peanuts. And I think that's what's needed to be done here. I'm sorry, Guy. Go ahead. You're
Can I
on mute.
pile on a little bit? Yeah. No,
Sure, go ahead,
So
man.
somebody muted me. I don't know who.
Wasn't
Uh, yeah, no, it was me. So 22 billion, roughly 21 point something billion.
9
For how
billion,
many?
yeah.
150,000 or is it 300,000? I don't remember.
No, I don't think I think it's 120,000.
How many headsets?
120,000
120,000 headsets. Okay. All right. So first of all, it's over, like I said, it's over 6 years, not counting 2025. But I think, Mike, what you were scratching your head about is, dude, that's like $170,000 per headset.
That's more than
That's
the
a lot of
Apple
money for a
headsets.
headset.
That's more than the
Yeah,
Apple
that's
headsets.
a
Little
little
bit.
bit. And that's why I alluded to the famous $2,000 toilet or whatever, because when whoever it is, some defense agency probably that calculates the cost of things and that figures out what the right amount is to pay and like all that other sort of stuff, they put every single bit into these programs. So it's not just the manufacturing, it's the development, it's the support, it's the training, it's the this, it's the that, over and over again. And when you add all that stuff up, like, the $2,000 toilet, it turned out that the equipment itself, the piece of the toilet itself cost $100 or whatever. And all the rest was the assumed lifetime of the toilet, maintenance, installation, the hours for the personnel, all other sort of stuff. Maybe it's still too high or higher than it should be, but it's not like there's an invoice somewhere that said I'm buying, 100 of these headsets and I'm paying $1.7 million or $17 million or whatever. It's just not how it works. And especially for, like Alan said, essentially brand new technology that's supposed to be used on the battlefield, or something like that, by people or who are flying things or like whatever it is that they're doing. There's a lot of expense and investment that needs to go into that. And unlike a private company, you don't write it off. You have to account for every bit of it, all self-contained within the program. So that's how I unscratch your head, if it's possible to do so much.
Fair enough. Well, look, maybe we could use the Apple headsets. They're a little cheaper. Anyway.
Well, the
guys,
Apple headsets might wind up with that commercial. I mean, I really, maybe I'm just pissing into the wind. Oops.
No,
You said the
it's
S word, can I
okay.
say the P word?
We're not a
Maybe I'm-
family
yeah,
show.
maybe
This
I'm
is
just
adult.
blowing smoke or something, but I think that a lot of the action, a lot of the real action, the real market making that happens with these things happens through B2B commercial applications, public sector investment, that sort of stuff. And we tend to get distracted by people walking around wearing goggles instead of just like seeing reality around them with their own two eyes normally. It's very distracting, but it's just, it just points to the kind of innovation and creativity that helped, the capitalist world go round.
Mhm. So just to be clear, Alan, do you think that the level of scrutiny being applied by the DOGE set is going to be applied to these military
No,
contracts?
hell no. Those are sacred cows. It's sacred cows.
It might be applied to potential Blue Origin contracts.
That would be interesting. But no, he wrote his check. He wrote his check. Anyway,
Well, so did we discuss on this show, or maybe I wasn't on it, the
And if
150 million, 200 million, or so, 400 million going to Tesla for all electric?
Cybertrucks for
military
the State
vehicles?
Department or something. All
Yeah,
the
we-
vehicles.
No, it's for military. It was for military.
well,
it was for electric tanks or
Cybertrucks.
something like that.
Cybertrucks for diplomats, I
Yeah, I
think.
thought it was armored Cybertrucks.
No,
for
this
State
is different.
That was a
This is
different 400 million. Oh, anyway, look, we're overtime.
Put a few of those together and you got a viable business.
Almost. Well, then you got to, whatever. Don't get me started. Just a quick parental warning. We do have strobe lights in adult language, so you're warned. Mike, Guy, thanks for joining today on The Gang. We hope you've enjoyed this. Happy Wednesday to you. We will be back tomorrow with another Techstrong Gang. I think we also have a a Tech Field Day presentation on live today on Techstrong TV, as well as the rest of our Techstrong TV lineup. So check that out. Hey, you could download the Techstrong TV mobile app on Apple and Google if you'd like. Go check that out. Our OTT app is coming soon as well.
Is that encrypted or not?
Only if it has to be. But until then, thanks. We need the peanut gallery. Here's another episode of Techstrong Gang. Have a great day, everyone. We're out.